Yeah, bro.
Ryan
Thanks for
Ayala.
coming on.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Eric Jasper here. That's how you say your last name, right?
Yeah, Eric Jasper here. You nailed
Nice,
it.
bro. Right on. So you are for a quick intro, you are the founder of Based Supplements. You're also would you say fitness fanatic, health and fitness?
Yeah, I would kind of put it into that sphere, health and fitness fanatic, more on the holistic side of health, but also just being a Chad, like in every single
Chad,
facet of
nice,
life.
man.
That's the adjective I would give to the approach that I take in every kind of facet of life.
Right on, bro. So I always like to kind of get a little background, get understanding of guests. So if we could kind of go back to the start, kind of where you grew up and how it all began.
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up on the South Shore of Long Island. I went to high school here. I graduated high school, stayed in the island for college. College was crazy. Spent a lot of time partying, doing some stupid stuff. I was in a fraternity, kind of just living my best life. And then COVID came around, put me into my house. And that's really when I started getting into this holistic sphere, learning more about compounds, learning more about the products that I currently sell now through my business, which we'll get to later. Um, but yeah, COVID really, when I look back at it, was a pivotal moment in my life because I went from going out 5, 6 days a week, getting blackout drunk, to immediately being home and having that time finally to reflect on like, what the fuck am I doing with my life right now? So that's when I first got into online business. That's when I first got into studying health for the first time. And two of the original compounds that I started experimenting with that I saw crazy results with is Shilajit and pine pollen. So
Mm,
whenever anyone asks me why those two products for the business that I have now, it's because those are two products anecdotally that I had crazy results with. So it's not a crazy story at all, but I found it from an Instagram story. So I was scrolling Instagram, found out about Shilajit. I took it from this other company. I love the product a lot. So I became an affiliate for that company. I started putting 10, 20, 30, 40 people onto the supplement. And because of how good I was at talking about the benefits and how good of an anecdotal case I was, just showcasing how Shilajit works in a person,
mhm.
that's when I said to myself, this is going to be the first company that I start after college. So that was the inception of Base Supplements after I graduated. I got a job, started grinding, making the business happen. And then once my job replaced my income, March of last year is when I quit my job. So went all in on the business. The business scaled super, super quickly. We went from doing 30 to 50K months quickly to 100K. Went to 200K. I thought that was the ceiling. We doubled revenue the next month, 400, and we're still growing super fast. We're facing a lot of business bottlenecks now that are unrelated to trying to get sales, which is
Hmm.
more like supply chain stuff, making sure that we could even fulfill the amount of volume that we're getting. But the journey has been crazy, definitely in the past year. The growth was so out of nowhere, and it's hard for me to conceptualize still the amount of growth that we experienced in just a year. But yeah, shit's been crazy, man.
So it's only been a year from inception to now.
So I launched the Shopify store in August 2022. So it's been a year and a half. But when I say the past year of growth, like the first calendar year starting January of last year was when we really started taking off because that's when I hopped on Twitter for the first
Mm,
time. And Twitter really changed the game.
that's pretty crazy. So it's been just technically a little over a year then. Because correct
Hmm.
me if I'm wrong, but I remember seeing you say that you started based 25K in debt, right?
Yeah.
So 25K in debt to now seven figures is basically in a year and a half, give or take. That's pretty
Yeah.
crazy, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, it definitely is crazy. And it's funny that you bring up the 25K in debt because I look back on that time and it sounds like the worst thing ever. But when I look back at myself at the person I was when I had 25K in debt, it was like I never had so much motivation, so much drive to make something happen because I had all of that pressure on my shoulders. And I got to this point where business is like more or less at a comfortable spot. And I do miss being in that position where there was no choice but to go all in and succeed, and really just make something out of nothing to make it happen. So I miss those days. I definitely am grateful and appreciative for where I am now. But there's definitely a factor that pressure will put into your life that just makes it so much more fulfilling.
Yeah, those times when your back is against the wall. That's interesting you say it that way too, because me and Ryan were actually having a similar conversation about kind of the role and the importance of having that pressure in your life, you know, in the trajectory of a male life, having those moments of being able to perform under pressure, having your back against the wall, and, you know, having that kind of adversity that lights a fire under your ass. Otherwise, you know, the human condition, we can be a little complacent sometimes. I definitely want to come back to that. But before, maybe we could go back to kind of the timeline. You were saying college time, you were getting drunk, partying a lot. Would you say you were kind of like a pretty normal guy at that point before things kind of took a turn for the better?
Yeah, definitely. I was a pretty standard college kid going out 5, 6 days a week, drinking, doing all sorts of crazy substances on the weekend that we won't go fully into. But yeah, I was just a product of my environment. I surrounded myself with people who had the same uh, idea of what they wanted to get out of college as me.
Hmm.
And when you surround yourself with those people that want to go out, party, go do crazy shit, that's what you end up doing by association. So I'm a big believer that environment is everything. And I spend a lot of time now optimizing my environment to be conducive to what I want to accomplish. But when I look back to my college environment, there was really the path of least resistance was me just partying all the
Hmm.
time.
So you just kind of randomly stumbled upon Shilajit. Did you have any kind of health journey of your own outside of that, or were you just kind of pretty normal guy, found this Shilajit and pine pollen and started experimenting for fun? Or was there kind of any other, like maybe intrinsic motivations or other things going on?
Yeah, there's definitely an intrinsic motivation factor to me wanting to be at optimal health. I have this personality trait where I'm super extremist, and it's something that I actually have been working on in the past few years of my life. But extremism brings with it um, kind of a way to that you approach life where you think everything is black and white. Like everything, like for example, comparing and contrasting like the carnivore versus the vegan diet. I ate vegan for a full year because I was convinced that being vegan was the black and white decision that I had to
Hmm.
make to optimize my health. So my health journey ironically started with me being vegan for a year. I think that was 2019 to 2020. When I look back to that period of my life, I just look at all of the health decisions that I was making. I'm like, damn, I really did not do my research. I really didn't look into what this type of shit would do for me later on down the road. But yeah, it really came with that extremist lifestyle. In terms of getting into holistic supplements, I really found a benefit in optimizing my hormone levels. And I am a big believer that your hormones dictate the way that you interact with the world. They dictate how you perceive the world, how people perceive you. Um, so yeah, definitely felt a strong inclination to wanting to optimize my male hormone levels right off the get go, and that's why I really love supplements like Shilajit and pine pollen because there was such a profound effect on my hormone levels.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially after being vegan, right? I bet that had the opposite effect on your hormones.
Yeah, definitely. And looking back at it, it's kind of funny because it there probably was a factor of veganism destroying my male hormone levels that led me to want to improve them. So
Yeah,
putting it into perspective, like being vegan for a year of my life honestly fits into the grand scheme of me becoming who I am today.
yeah.
And when I look back to that time, it's not, I wouldn't say that I would do it any different because it all made me who I am.
It was kind of like a domino effect that led you to get go down that path. Yeah. So was the vegan kind of your first health experimentation or kind of, you know, taking things into your own hands and making some adjustments?
Yeah, when I look back at it, I would say veganism was my first huge pivot in terms of wanting
Hmm.
to take full control over my health. I did it for an entire year. I didn't necessarily feel bad when I was vegan, but when I got off of the diet is when I started to really collect the baggage from the amount of stress my body was under while on that diet. Reintroducing poor quality meat was definitely tough for me. I remember my first meal back from veganism was a Chick-fil-A, a spicy Chick-fil-A sandwich. And
Put
that
a
was my
sprinkle of
idea of what
MSG.
like Yeah, that was my idea of what like meat was, because in all the vegan propaganda, they're like, hey, like meat is bad for you. And they're all, I mean, the meat that they're comparing it to is the lowest quality stuff that you could find that people talk about. But when you really introduce high quality food into your life, grass fed meats, pasture raised organic chickens, pasture raised corn and soy free eggs, all of this like nutrient powerhouse meat, like it's so good for you, so nutrient dense. But I mean, if you're saying that the meat that to consume is spicy chicken sandwich from Chick-fil-A, then you're not doing it right.
Yeah. So that period was still while you were in college then?
Yeah, I was in college at the time.
So you had the double stressors of your lifestyle on top of the vegan diet. That's pretty interesting. So you discovered Shilajit and pine pollen. That was around the same time or a little bit after?
Yeah, it was let me try to think. Yeah, it was a little bit after my period of being vegan, because I was vegan before COVID. So
So what would you say was kind of the shift in you going from, the partying college guy on vegan to then reintroducing meat to then experimenting with some supplements and taking your hormone health maybe a little more seriously? What was that kind of transformation like?
I mean, the transformation was super
Yeah.
pivotal. Yeah, pivotal, that's the word. And when I look back at it, it's COVID. COVID forced me into this self-reflection mode where I had no choice but to sit with myself because I had nothing else to do. All bars were closed. Everyone from my college town went home, so there was no one to hang out with. And I started reading books. I started looking more into health. And that was the real pivot between being my previous self in college and taking my health into my own hands, and moving forward and starting to actually learn a little bit more of how to take care of my body. And when you go into this period where you have really no choice but to learn or do nothing, it really changes the way that you interact with everything around you. Um, yeah, it was definitely a pivotal moment in my life, COVID.
So what did it look like in college? Were you already going in that direction of like, oh, I want to start my own business? You just didn't know exactly what, and then you stumbled upon the Shilajit and supplements? Or was that kind of a light bulb moment for you where dots connected of like, oh, maybe this is something I want to do?
Yeah, so when I look back at Shilajit, I was putting so many people onto it that at the time I was like, this is going to be the first business that I start after college. Around the same time during COVID is when I got into drop shipping as well.
Mm,
And I saw some early success with that. I was able to scale a store to 13K in a month, which was at the time crazy money to me.
that's
So it
crazy.
gave me that little taste of it's possible. It's possible to have an online business. It's possible to separate time and money. So I made that 13K. I booked a one-way flight to San Diego, balled out, rented an Airbnb for a month. My Facebook ads died. I came home, had no idea how to revive them, and then that business just died, and I went back into college mode after school reopened. But when I look back, that's an important moment of my life because it gave me that hint of telling me that it was possible to make money on the internet. Now,
Mm.
thinking of that in the same sphere, in the same time as me finding out about Shilajit, the dots kind of started to connect, and I told myself this is going to be the first business that I start after college. So in terms of actually researching Shilajit after college is an interesting topic to talk about because there's a lot of discrepancy in the market for Shilajit. Obviously, there's a lot of worry about heavy metals, mycotoxins, quality of the stuff that you're receiving, making sure that it's real, making sure that it actually has sufficient amounts of the active ingredient fulvic acid in it. So I took it upon myself to lab test multiple major supply chains, whether they were Himalayan, US based Altai Mountains. And we source ours from the Altai Mountains because Altai Mountains Shilajit always trumps the market. Whenever
Mm.
I lab tested it in terms of fulvic acid potency, and their modern purification methods also make it so that the heavy metal content is always below the permissible levels, and mycotoxins always just never any mycotoxin contamination in them. So, yeah, that was the basis of me researching all of these supply chains pre building the company. And that's also what contributed to putting me into that 25K debt in the beginning.
Yeah, so kind of going to when you really started working on the business, because I imagine health business, but especially something like, supplement business, it's not one of those blueprint things where you can just go like, find a coach or easily find someone who's done it and kind of get that blueprint. And as it seems in your experience, like sourcing, testing, like there's so much room for error, but also just options. And someone who, if you don't have experience prior, trying to just figure that all out, I imagine that was pretty tricky. Like, how did you kind of go about just going from being a college kid, just taking Shilajit to like, all right, how am I going to source this? How am I going to actually turn this into a business and a supplement company?
Yeah, you really have to put yourself into the trenches and, I mean, be the person that's trying to put all the puzzle pieces together to make the business work. In terms of actually setting up the company and lab testing everything and making sure that we had a pure and potent source, I mean, that's a non-negotiable in terms of starting a company that you have a long-term vision for. Any one of these drop shipping supplement companies can source something from Supplefull or a local USA-based manufacturer, throw a private label on it, and then just start promoting it. But in terms of retaining customers for a long time, building a brand that people believe in, and really building trust with the people that purchase your products so that they not only purchase one product, but become purchasers for life. It's important to really take the time to ensure that the product that you have, one, is quality, and two, that you actually understand where it comes from. A lot of these companies that you see on the market, if you ask their owners, do you know the source of your supplement? A lot of them won't even be able to tell you where it comes from because they just get them from USA-based wholesalers, and those wholesalers are sourcing it from other countries. So in terms of Shilajit as well, I guarantee if you ask any of these companies that are trickling into the Facebook ads ecosystem right now, where they get their Shilajit from, a lot of them wouldn't be able to locate the supply chain. So that's important in terms of building trust with your audience. And in terms of actually just like building the business from scratch, becoming that person that had $0 to his name to a 7-figure business owner, it's just trial and error. Like, you have to continue to talk to people, continue to meet people, continue to make those connections, throw darts at the dartboard, whether it's experimenting on your website design, experimenting with Facebook ads, for example, email marketing. It's all just a million moving parts to your business that you have to put yourself in the trenches to really learn how to do all this stuff.
So you were kind of just doing your best moving forward, trying to figure things out on the fly, testing, and because I'm imagining was a big change probably pretty quickly from, sampling, ordering products yourself in the beginning, potentially like packing and shipping stuff yourself, to probably with the numbers you're doing now, having fulfillment and everything taken care of.
Yeah, there's certain benchmarks in business that you're going to hit, and it's not going to be possible for you to maintain your old system without breaking the business. You have to move to a new way of systematizing things. So, for example, like you brought up the fulfillment, I was physically able to do the fulfillment up until about 80K a month. After that, there's not enough hours in a day for me and a few of my college friends who I hired to be able to fulfill and pack all these orders all the time. So, I mean, I waited a little bit too long on that front, so the transition was a little bit rocky. But when you scale to those numbers, it's and it becomes physically not possible for your old systems to handle it. You have to move on to these bigger business solutions. So fulfillment is just one example of something that we had to eventually outsource at around 100K a month. And there's a million other things that you'll eventually have to outsource, because being a responsible business owner, if you're spending so much time working in your business, then you're not going to be able to work on your business and really propel it to those levels of growth that is possible for it.
100%, 100%. So kind of going back to the environment stuff, you mentioned that Twitter was kind of an integral part of the brand growing and things kind of picking up and getting that momentum. What was your kind of process in getting into Twitter, like meeting people, networking, and like what role did that play in your environment changing, which kind of led to where you are now, like you said?
Yeah, definitely. I first off want to shout out Noah Ryan, because he's the reason that I actually hopped on Twitter. So Noah emailed me. He cold emailed me about a year ago, because we hopped on our first call together on January 1st, 2023. Um, but he cold emailed me. He asked me a question about my company, and then he was like, "Hey, you should hop on Twitter because there's definitely a growing health community there, and it's definitely a good place to be." So I hopped on Twitter because I knew Noah. I was able to get introduced to a lot of these guys in the health sphere and really posing myself as a person of value in this health ecosystem was the way that we were able to propel the business to new heights in terms of picking up new affiliates, helping the brand get off the ground through that, helping build brand awareness through people starting to talk about the quality product that we were putting out. And it's important that, again, going back to building a quality product off the get-go and building that trust with your audience and your customers, not only your customers, but your affiliates too. The highest quality affiliates that you have promoting your product are going to be the ones that have reputation on the line in terms of their Twitter audiences, because these guys aren't going to promote something that is shit. Like, these guys only promote stuff that they feel real differences with and that they trust the supply chains and founders behind. So getting off the ground with Twitter affiliates was huge over the first like 3-4 months of 2023. And then actually building Twitter itself into a sales channel is something that's super untapped. So if you've seen the growth of the actual base subs Twitter, it's been crazy. Like, it's been ridiculous. And there's not a lot of e-com businesses that can really successfully turn Twitter into a sales channel because Twitter is very intellectually based. The type of content that attracts people on Twitter is not the scroll stopping type stuff, not the stuff that gets people to impulse buy on Facebook or Instagram, for example, or even the biggest brain rot platform being TikTok.
Yeah.
But Twitter, you really have to lead with value, and it's super important in building a health-based e-com brand in that ecosystem, because the people there are so well educated. People there are so well informed by following these trusted influencers in the health space. So it's harder to sell a shit product on Twitter.
Yeah.
Definitely. So you really have to be building a reputable and valuable brand on there. But yeah, actually turning Twitter into a sales channel itself has been huge, and that account has just been skyrocketing. It's really exciting to see.
Yeah, I've seen that, man. That's super cool. So in terms of the environment, like maybe more so on like a personal sense, because it sounds like you relate to the idea of business also kind of being a vehicle for personal growth and development, right? So what would you say, like, what was your kind of shift in environment that kind of allowed you to take things to the next level?
That's just it, shifting my environment. So I was able to scale my business to around 30 to 50K a month just by grinding at my laptop, tweeting from my kitchen table like I am now. But in order to really propel yourself to that next paradigm of creative ideas, which you can implement into your business, I really had to get out of my hometown. So I spent a lot of the mid-year just traveling everywhere. I went to Austin. I linked up with a bunch of guys there. Went to Vegas. That's where I hung out with Vance for the first time. Spent a lot of time in Florida. We went to Mexico for a month. That was one of the most pivotal trips of the year for sure for me. That was actually the month where we did our highest amount of revenue, and I was away from home. And the reason that we were able to reach that level of revenue that month while I was away from home is because I'm around people who are in a similar sphere as me. We're sharing ideas at the kitchen table in Tulum. In terms of actually launching the new pine pollen product too, that wouldn't have been half as successful if I just did that from my kitchen table compared to launching it like we did in Tulum. Utilizing that Twitter sales channel, utilizing all of the affiliates, and really firing that out in the most effective way possible. So yeah, changing your environment is super important. I am a person, I've come to realize this year, that definitely gets stuck in a lot of patterns. If I spend too much time in my hometown, like I have been in the past month, I really need to get out. It's been 30 days and I'm going crazy. But if I spend too much time in a place that I'm familiar with, then things just kind of get mundane. You start getting more into like work patterns, which isn't necessarily bad, but it's definitely a killer of creativity. So that's why I like spending a lot of time away from home.
Yeah, I'm actually in your Instagram broadcast channel, so I've seen you talk a good amount about like breaking the pattern with travel, hometown stuff. So that's all interesting, and it seems like it's maybe a little bit of a hunter type tendency that you have in that sense.
Hmm.
Because I
Yeah,
could
I would
definitely
say
relate to
so.
that as well.
Yeah, novel environments are definitely I definitely do seek novel environments and novel experiences a lot more. I get very, very bored very quickly just doing monotonous work. Uh, but like that hunter farmer hypothesis that Noah talks about a lot, I relate to heavily for sure.
Yeah, because that new stimuli is kind of unrivaled for, like you said, sparking creativity, having you be outside of your comfort zone, and yeah, it's actually really crazy the impact it has just on your almost your subconscious thoughts. A question here for you. Obviously, I want to kind of segue back to some fitness stuff and maybe talk about your own health stuff. But um, what would the ideal version of Eric look like for you? And like generally, what would you say you're striving towards in like a holistic sense, like in life?
Yeah, in a holistic sense in life, I just want to be the highest masculine version of myself, leading with value, leading by virtue, becoming a physical specimen, becoming an absolute intellectual specimen as well. And yeah, just being able to be that person that's able to provide for my future family, because in a biological sense, I think that's the innate purpose of any man is to be able to provide and protect for his tribe. So that's really what I strive for. And when I look like 5, 10, 20 years into the future, I want to be that person that's the leader of the tribe, the person that's providing for the people that I care about and the people that I love.
Absolutely, bro. So, what would the ideal version of Eric look like then, taking all that into account?
Successful business owner, able to put uh, money on the table for his family, able to go out and be the communicator, be the person that's closing the deals, being the person that's in charge of the business and running, basically the man in charge, which is kind of what I'm at a smaller scale right now. But it's cool to think like 10, 20 years in the future, business is definitely going to be at a higher level of play for sure.
Yeah, it's cool to hear you say the articulate it that way in terms of like being a physical specimen, intellectual specimen. Basically, in one way or another, you're trying to say that, well-roundedness is important to you, right?
Hmm.
And kind of almost mastering all realms of life and your own self. So I don't even know if I mentioned this to you, but the name of this podcast is actually Holistic Mastery. So that's a theme that's super big here. And so this is episode 4, and with all 4 guests so far, that's kind of been something we're touching on. So valuing being well rounded, especially on all the important areas of life, specifically for men, and just touching on all those points: life, business, personal development, fitness, health. So, on that note, fitness is a big thing for you. Obviously, you have a pretty impressive physique. But one thing that I've noticed that a lot of people with maybe similar physiques to yourself don't really pay attention to is functional training, mobility, corrective training. It's almost like in the health space, in nutrition or supplementation, how most people are lacking some awareness on critical parts. In the physical fitness space, it's like a lot of people, the average person, right, is thinks training and being healthy for them means like training in a bodybuilding approach, eating broccoli and rice and bland chicken with a protein shake, right? And taking their, Safeway multivitamin. So you kind of seem to have come from somewhat of a bodybuilding background, is that right?
I guess you could say that. I traditionally haven't followed a specific set of training for long enough of a time for me to identify with like bodybuilding.
Mm.
But I mean, I definitely have kind of a bodybuilding physique through the types of training that I've done in the past. I guess you could say.
So what do you think it is that got you kind of from that style of approach to also incorporating like functional training, functional weightlifting? I've seen you doing pretty crazy kettlebell moves because like my personal philosophy is for majority of people, the most optimal way to train is going to be functional weightlifting, including kettlebells, big emphasis on calisthenics, mobility, corrective training, which is all the kind of stuff you're doing as well. But it's like a lot of people don't have even much awareness around this, and especially for people who have goals like becoming a physical specimen, right? We have to check off every box. So I think those are super important areas. What would you say, like, what roles have those played for you, and how did you kind of get into those kind of training? Did you also, on another note, did you have a background in athletics or sports by chance?
Yeah, I was a wrestler in high school and I also played baseball.
Okay,
Um,
nice.
yeah,
That makes
thinking back
sense.
to the high school days, definitely wrestling plays a big role in developing your fitness mindset because that is just the most gruesome form of training, especially for like a 14, 15, 16-year-old to go through having to cut weight at that young of an age and pushing yourself in practice definitely helped develop my mindset. But yeah, definitely during college and a little bit after college, I spent a lot more time in the bodybuilding type sphere of training,
Hmm.
which is where I think 99% of people our age kind of land because
Yeah,
that's the mainstream fitness narrative. It's just bodybuilding, get big, increase your bench, increase your squat. Um,
exactly.
but I got introduced to unconventional training, which is like kettlebells, maces, clubs, sandbags, about 2 years ago. And it definitely has played a huge role in my life because it made me realize that fitness is so much more than just how much you could get up on the bench, how much you could squat. Fitness in a holistic mastery type of mindset is how can you train your body to move better in your day to day life? How can you train your body so that in 10, 20, 30 years, you're able to move around, have fun with your kids, like enjoy your life to its fullest. And the kind of shotgun approach to fitness nowadays is just like it's exactly that. It's just like so short sighted. People are injuring themselves so easily with the way that they're training, and people aren't really thinking of fitness in like a long time horizon where how is this going to benefit me in a long time span as opposed to me just wanting to get huge in the next like 2 years.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially amongst men and young people in general. The focus is often kind of hyper fixated on just aesthetics, right? And looking good rather than healthy long-term thinking. So it's interesting when, like people, it seems like yourself, when you kind of have the perspective of just trying to optimize your performance and your health, the other stuff is kind of just a benefit that comes along with that. Um, but it's always easier for like people who are in sport or athletics to get as opposed to like you said like 99% of people are going with a bodybuilding approach because you can see that translation of like, okay, this is going to benefit me in my sport, it's going to benefit how I perform, I can be faster, stronger, etc., right? But normal people who don't think of themselves as an athlete, they're like, okay, well, why do I need to do that? So something I kind of like to say is like we're all athletes in life, right? Like everyone has to walk. I think I heard something, I don't know if it's true or not, but it was like most people don't sprint after the age of like 25 or 30, which, anecdotally makes sense. So it's
Yeah.
like most people are not, training in a way to, be sustainable in their life to where you're going to have to sit and get up and squat and, pick up your kids and be able to move. And now with a lot of people, working remote and whatnot, people have neck pain, back pain, in their 20s. So it's like if you're not taking that kind of stuff into your into your own hands, like how are you going to end up, a few years down the line?
Yeah, definitely. The modern world, it's completely the natural way to be just like out of shape, developing those lower back problems, developing those neck problems because everyone's working at a computer. No one has to, I mean, in the sense of the modern world compared to how it was like thousands of years ago, no one has to go out and hunt their food. No one has to go out and protect their family. Like it's all like the modern world is super, super simple and safe to live in. So, by default, people are just out of shape. And the people that are in shape nowadays are people that actually have to take that onto their own shoulders and say, like, hey, I want to go to the gym. Hey, I want to improve my physical fitness. So it's more of a actual choice that people have to make today rather than being in shape by default, which is like an interesting perspective on like the evolution of society. Um, but yeah, definitely fitness has played a pivotal role in my life. I can't imagine not going to the gym 5 days a week. Because when you start to really get into functional training and enjoying your fitness for the first time, you look forward to actually going to the gym, pushing yourself, and feeling that masculine drive, which is definitely a big part of being my future, just like a masculine leader.
Yeah, a big part of it is enjoying it too, right? Because it's almost not so much like the typical working out, but more so like training, like in a sports sense versus like bodybuilding training. it's pretty tedious in my opinion. I feel like a lot of, average people who are training that way feel the same way, like, okay, couple of sets, this machine, okay, one, two, switch. It's like you don't get into a flow state. You don't feel like you're performing. It's not very enjoyable compared to, like something like a kettlebell flow, calisthenics. These type of things are more athletic and functional. And then also when you see the kind of results of what that gets you, it's pretty game changing. So are you in any types of athletics or sport right now that you're kind of translating your training into or no?
Not necessarily. It's mostly just being able to flow better with the kettlebell. When I think of what athletics I'm kind of involved in now, it's just learning more tricks with that kettlebell and becoming more of a finesse god with it. But yeah, that's like my main source of athletics right now.
Yeah, because I think I've seen you mention that you're interested in starting to train your neck after your time in Mexico with Noah and Vance and those guys. That's
Yeah.
something I'm big on, and because it's one of those neglected things, right? Like a normal person training bodybuilding, like they have no awareness of training your neck, training your jaw, training your shoulders, training your hips, training your wrist, all that stuff. So, it's interesting because in my opinion, the most like optimal sport long term, which is in alignment with like, masculine purpose and becoming a specimen in all senses, is martial arts. And this type of training and martial arts go hand in hand. But, like a lot of people who neglect this type of training but are in martial arts end up getting severely injured and messing up their bodies in the process. So, kind of touching all these stuff, you said you had the background in wrestling as well. I was thinking, that's definitely, especially with the type of kettlebells that you're doing, like over 100 pounds, 80 pounds, something like that. Like that's going to translate really well for you getting back into martial arts if that's something you're thinking about.
Yeah, when I make the move down to Florida next month, I'm planning to join a fight gym down there because the guys in Mexico really inspired me to get into fighting again. And they really made me realize how feminine centric my approach to fitness was. Like bodybuild on the spectrum of like feminine to masculine approach to fitness, it's like bodybuilding is by far the most feminine way to approach fitness.
Yeah.
Going to the gym and just like doing your 9 to 12 reps and feeling like a little bit of burn at the end and be like, oh, I want to stop. That's definitely the most feminine way to approach your fitness.
Yeah.
Then it comes, I would say like on the spectrum is like unconventional training is a little bit more masculine approach to fitness because you're throwing around heavy ass shit and you're throwing it around in very unconventional ways and challenging your body in certain aspects that you're not going to get doing just traditional body building type training. And then the most masculine way, obviously, to approach your fitness is getting into a ring with another dude that wants to fucking kill you. And your only way out is to fight your way out. So, yeah, those guys really inspired me to get into fighting and take a little bit more of a more masculine approach to fitness.
Yeah, hitting all those marks, well-rounded, Cali, unconventional, like functional weightlifting, martial arts is definitely the path to being the most optimized physical specimen. You said you're going to move down to Florida next month. What's that change looking like for you?
Yeah, so like we were talking about before, it's really important for me to be in a novel environment so I have that creative energy flow all the time. And one thing I also have realized this year is that I'm not a big fan of the cold New York winters. So we're heading down there for 6 months. I'm moving in with a couple of the boys. We have a 6-month lease in like St. Petersburg area.
Nice.
So we're gonna hang out there for a little bit, and we're able to move out after the 6 months. So I wouldn't say that we're gonna be tied there. I know based on all of our personalities, we'll probably finish out that 6-month lease and just be like, it's time to go to a new location. But in terms of changing the environment and being able to settle down in a place for a little bit more of a longer period, surrounded by those guys that are in a similar realm of business, is going to be super important for the growth of my own business this year.
Yeah, being around that kind of masculine energy of people on the same path as you, similar values seems to be critical. And sounds like that's kind of what helped you in that period being in Mexico and what you're trying to kind of set up in Florida again. Um, it's interesting because I think that's something I'm not sure if you've heard, but the Tate brothers have kind of popularized in the mainstream of kind of being around that type of energy, being around your guys, and actually living in that environment. So, uh, yeah, that's something that's super beneficial, both in the personal sense and the business sense. Is that kind of what you're trying to set up by doing that? Because also by having a stable base for a period of time, it allows you to like invest there. So if you're constantly moving around, like you're not going to want to buy too many things for that one location. Things that are going to benefit you, you want to kind of stay light. So it's a kind of sweet spot balance of both, I would say. What do you think about that?
Yeah, definitely a sweet spot balance. I do love novel environments, but it's definitely annoying to bounce from one place to the other week after week after week. So being able to settle down in a nice location like Tampa is going to be definitely beneficial and conducive to the growth of the business, especially being surrounded by these go-getter dudes who are in a similar type of sphere, growing their own businesses. And like you said, it's literally like the Tate compound, like living with dudes who are really going for it. Living with dudes who are who have a similar drive to you is definitely important. And we're young. We shouldn't be wasting our time just being in our hometowns if we can afford to not live in our hometown. Shouldn't waste our time just doing menial stuff at 24, 25 years old. And it's important to really surround yourself with like-minded people and continue to grow.
Yeah, I mean, I think like if any guy compares like when they've been just like on their own day to day, doing the things they would normally do, whatever work, working on your business, training, etc., compared to a time when you've been surrounded by like, your guys, brothers, and it's like the motivation, the efficiency that you push forward with is just unrivaled. So
Mm-hmm.
I guess on that note, kind of wrapping things up, what's next for you? Obviously, you are going to be moving to Florida soon, like you said, getting into martial arts. What else is next for Erik, and what's next for Based?
So next for me, I'm finishing up this bulk cycle. After I moved to Florida, I'm going into some martial arts type training, cycling my training that way. In terms of personal growth, I'm still going to work on the business a lot this year. Definitely getting smarter in terms of my knowledge in health, my knowledge in business. And then on the business side of things, just continuing to scale out the business both vertically, horizontally. So scaling the products that we have now, really seasoning those customer relationships, and also scaling horizontally in terms of releasing new products this year. So we're looking a lot more into traditional Russian medicine compounds, which is super interesting to us because we have a really good relationship now with our supplier in the Altai region of Russia, where we get our
Mm.
Shilajit from. So we've been experimenting with a lot of compounds there, which is super exciting. And then the business itself, just growing it into a powerhouse, both on Twitter and on other platforms.
Awesome, bro. Well, I mean, looking forward to connecting more too here. I think we might align in Florida, so that would be cool to meet, and maybe we could run a round two. But great speaking to you, bro, and thanks for coming on.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.